Let's play a game. We'll call it, Why Were the Jews Always Mad at Paul? I'll ask a question, I'll give you some choices, and then try to give you the correct answer. Let's begin with some background. Paul the Apostle was A, Jewish. There we are. B, Christian. C, a Roman citizen. D, yes. And the answer is yes. First, let's bust a myth. That first bathroom stall that everyone avoids is not the dirtiest, but statistically the cleanest. See the July 12th, 2013 episode of Mythbusters. But another myth is that the Christians and the Jews split about 2 weeks after the resurrection. They didn't. Paul was a Christian, yes, but he likely didn't call himself that. He was a Jew who followed Jesus. Christians and Jews really didn't separate completely for a very long time, and that split was not uniform. Jesus did not send everybody a text that said, "That's it, we're out of here." Paul died a Jew who followed Jesus, and yes, it appears he was a Roman citizen as well. So Acts is being a little misleading in our story, though probably not intentionally, about who was Jewish and who was not. Paul, Silas, those who were angry, they were all Jewish. Question number 2. When Paul argued that Jesus was the Messiah, he A, had easy pickings in the scripture about a guy who was going to take a cross. B, was building on the Jewish expectation of the time. C, was using themes more than specific texts. And D, explained how cool celebrating Christmas would be. E, B, and C. And the answer is B. B, and C. First off, the idea of a Messiah was not all set and neat. What or who this person would be depended on who you were talking to. Even the messianic passages in the Old Testament are pretty earthy. They point to a return of the Davidic kings. But the idea of Messiah also developed in Judaism out of the prophetic tradition, which pointed to a saving of the world and not just the restoration of Israel. Paul was arguing about something his fellow Jews already didn't quite agree on. He was arguing about something his fellow Jews thought was going to happen, but did not realize already had happened. Now, before I ask question 3, the text, the story, talks about devout Greeks. They're called devout Greeks because they had not officially joined synagogue. They were guests who had not become Jewish. So question 3, to become Jewish, the head of a Greek household had to A, promise to tithe. B, promise to pretend to tithe. C, that was not funny. D, give up the recipe to that tasty salad dressing. Or E, get circumcised. Yeah, that was better than I expected. And the answer is E, get circumcised, along with any other males in the household who were going to join. Question 4. The response of most Greek men to the question, want to join synagogue, was A, couldn't I just tithe? B, oh, look at the time. C, no. Let's face it, it was just too much for most. And in a world where women, you have taken the brunt of life historically in so many different ways, here we have a small instance where we can truly say, if you're a man, you'd understand. And our final question, number 5. To join the Jewish Christian movement proclaimed by Paul, A, men shaved their heads rather than be circumcised. B, women created a new tradition, Sunday dinner. Or C, you just had to believe. And the answer is C, you just had to believe. So, Paul and Silas come into town. They go to synagogue where they're welcome because they're Jewish. And then it starts. They proclaim a Judaism starring Jesus, and some of the Jews are receptive, and also some of the Greeks are receptive. The idea for Paul, of course, is to bring the whole synagogue along into the very Jewish Jesus movement, but it doesn't quite work out, and Paul and Silas get into hot water for causing division. This would become a pattern for Paul, traveling and preaching in synagogues, creating new house churches / synagogues where the Jews and the Greeks would be on equal footing. And the big problem this caused is in surprise question number 6. The Jews who did not follow Paul wanted the non-Jewish Greeks to keep worshiping with them because A, grape leaves at potlucks. I mean, have you had grape leaves? They are so good. Or B, money. Let's bust a myth. When an athlete or a team owner or a musician or an actor or an employee, etc., leaves saying it is not about the money, it's usually about the money. No doubt the Jews who disagreed with Paul and Silas did not like their community split, but the money those guests, those Greek folk were bringing into the synagogue, to lose that, yeah, that left a mark. So this is the start of a long process. One religion will crack into two, one following Jesus but still very Jewish, the other seeking to maintain its traditions, especially circumcision, and eventually staying kosher. Trying to follow God in different ways. And after the Jewish temple was destroyed in about 70 AD, this became a fight for the soul of the Jewish people. By the way, there's nothing wrong with Jewish traditions. They point to our relationship with God. But isn't it interesting how sometimes a thing seems so important to a message, but then we make that thing the message, and it's not the message at all? Which leads me to a point. Why was cursive so important back in the day? Because you wrote with a quill. Literally the feather of a goose or a swan or a turkey. And quills break when you pick them up and put them down a lot. Cursive is the art of writing without all that picking up and putting down. It lets you communicate effectively and save your quill. And that was the point. The beauty of cursive was not the point. It grew out of a need to communicate without killing every goose on the planet. So cursive is now ignored by some schools because we have keyboards. Even though cursive is great for motor skills and for brain development. Funny, I used to be able to tell who sent me snail mail just by glancing at the envelope. We all knew each other's handwriting. Now you don't see someone's cursive unless they send you a card. But cursive was never essential. Communication is. And what happened to those early Jews still happens. Christians split for reasons that seem essential but often aren't. I mean, how many churches are there here in Little Mount Joy? About 15? Most came around because of an argument. And a lot of times it's like that family feud where we can't even remember how the fight started. Paul and Silas were trying to convince their own people to follow Jesus because Jesus tried to convince the world to keep the main thing the main thing. And the main thing was what Jesus proclaimed. The main thing is God, and God's main thing is love. Some traditions and beliefs are important. I couldn't function in some churches because of our differences. That goes both ways. But if there is a tradition or a practice that makes us exclusive, that raises us up in our opinion and deems others unworthy, or prevents us from loving our neighbors, they are getting in the way of the main thing and need to be examined. The main thing is God. God's main thing is love. Let the one who has ears hear.